if you want people to perform, like you have to legitimately want them to win.
Right.
And not everybody leads that way. Not everybody says, oh, I want the people who work for me to win because then they might take my job. Like that's immense insecurity. Yeah. And I'm not shy. I don't have insecurity issues. I feel somewhat bad for the people that do, but I legitimately want people to win.
Welcome to Beyond the Blueprint, powered by Contractors, Closers, and Connections, Orlando. Join me for in-depth interviews with some of the top commercial real estate and development executives in the industry. We uncover their success stories, their strategies, and their lessons learned along the way. Gain valuable insight whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out. Good afternoon, Beyond the Blueprint podcast. We have the opportunity to sit down with a good friend of mine, Nathan Griffiths with Cuhaci Peterson. Nathan, I appreciate you joining me here.
No, it's great to be here, Branson. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, it's an interesting time where we're taking a different stab at marketing here, but I truly do appreciate you sitting down and just going over some of your experiences in your career and your origin story, where you came from, how you got to where you are today. So let's just go for let's get a little bit snippet of who you work for, what you do at Cuhaci, and then we'll kind of go back to your origin story.
Sure. So I'm one of the principals at Cuhaci Peterson. We have 5 or 6 now. We kind of oversee general markets. A lot of it's market centric. Some of it's regional, like our principal out in Phoenix or up in Philly. And so they oversee a little bit more regional. But I predominantly work in the convenience space, small retail. But I've been fortunate to be there a minute. So I've worked on a little bit of everything.
A long minute. We say.
I'm trying to stay young here, man. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah. So we're going to go back to just kind of your origin story. So where you came from, how you even started to do architecture. You fell in love with construction. Did you just like to draw and you're like, oh, I need to pursue this? So we'll go back as far as you want to go back and just kind of open up the conversation to your experience and where you came from.
So this is a true story. Like, I don't even make this up. I'm in the 4th grade. I get the opportunity to go to this class and I design my first house. And it's like they say there's all this study and research that say when you're in 4th grade, most of the time, like if the things you want to do there somehow translate to a career. And so that's when I set my mind on it. But I didn't go traditional. I didn't do 4 or 5 year degree in college. I wasn't about college. I went to a technical school. I started drafting. So I came into Cuhaci Peterson at 19 years old, one step above the print room, back when it had like real ammonia.
Yeah.
Like, man, you go in there, you'd work, you'd be high as a kite. But I learned, I asked questions, I got opportunities. I always say that like the right people left and the wrong people stayed. And so they gave me lots of growth and here we are.
Yeah. So when you started in the print room, and then how did you figure out the avenue to where you are now?
You know, people led me to believe that I could do or be anything. Mm-hmm. And that's so huge. And so they gave me these opportunities. And so I had drafting skills. And so I just started drawing stuff. I managed my first Albertsons remodel at the age of 20. And I remember it like it was yesterday because we had these grand dinners at like the end of these surveys. And we're sitting around a table with like Albertsons, like high people, like a bunch of engineers. And I look at my boss and they're taking drink orders. And he's just wondering if I'm going to roll the dice. Yeah. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. We joked about it for a lot of years later. He goes, I'd have backed you up.
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm not about taking that big a chance at 20. But it was cool. I mean, they really gave me opportunities, and I asked questions, and you know, they gave me answers.
Sure. Did you have a mentor like growing up, and when you started to pursue architecture, did you have someone that you kind of looked to kind of fill that role?
I really didn't. Yeah. Like until I got to Cuhaci, like I didn't understand the business. I mean, like my mom and I laugh about it. Like they told me that I could, if I was really, really good at drafting, I could make $37,000 a year. When I came to Cuhaci, I was literally making more as like a shift manager at Domino's Pizza.
Right.
Like it's
bottom of the barrel.
Oh man. I was like, I'm giving up the dream of maybe like running a Domino's and I'm going to move to Florida from Ohio and I'm going to try to make this thing happen. I had people tell me, you're nuts. You'll be back living in your parents' basement like in a year.
And what do you think that just kept you like pursuing and building and growing?
Oh, I didn't want to go back to Ohio.
Yeah. So
like, I mean, I love to win. And so I'm like, I'm not failing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to be that guy. And so it was like this challenge accepted. But crazy story was I moved in October, like a few weeks before Christmas. Lonnie Peterson pulls like the 35 of us together. They just let 2 people go. Like, I'm the last person in the door. We let 2 people go, and he tells us we all got to take a 20% pay cut. I'm making $7.50 an hour, bro. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm standing out at the elevator. We were on Lake Eola at the time. I'm standing at the elevator, and I'm going, all right, I had a van that brought my stuff, whatever little stuff I had, brought a van down to move me down. I'm like, what am I packing in my Mustang to go home? Because like something's gonna stay.
Right.
And I had one of our VPs. He stopped me and he goes, listen, we didn't move you across the country to let you go home. And it was like, I roasted him at his like 25th anniversary several years later, and I brought tears to his eyes because I reminded him of that story at the end after I totally ripped him. But I reminded him of that story. I was like, that was kind of like early on, I was like, that's what leadership looks like. Mm-hmm. And that's what positioning people to like want to be here. Like after that, like I was in.
Do you feel that gave you like a self-confidence that like, even though I've risked it, like this guy's not going to let me go back home?
It did, but I'm competitive, so I still wanted to show up every day.
Yeah.
I still wanted to do the job right. I still wanted to learn. I still wanted to grow because I didn't want to be stagnant.
Sure. And so growing, so from that moment, you go, you're draftman at Cuhaci, then what's the next step from there?
So I spent about 7.5 years I did a few different projects drafting, and then I got involved in our Albertsons program, which was a huge program for us back in the late 90s, early 2000s. We did a bunch of remodels every year and new stores, and I spent 7 years learning Albertsons. Like that seems so mundane, but it's amazing how much you can learn about construction, about process. Drawings, all of the details. Got an opportunity to work with a lot of engineers, learn some of those really important kind of rules of thumb, and it translated immediately into just about anything else that I ever got the opportunity to work on.
Today's episode is brought to you by Bryce Knuth of Insurance Office of America. As a contractor or real estate owner in Florida, you've likely experienced the impact of rising insurance premiums year after year. With the challenging insurance marketplace, having a specialist who focuses on your industry is critical now more than ever before. If you'd like a second set of eyes on your current insurance program or don't have a relationship with your current broker, please contact Bryce Knuth at 407-697-6944 via call or text, or email bryce.knuth@ioausa.com. Don't let rising insurance costs catch you off guard. Reach out to Bryce today. And so working on the Albertsons projects, was that something that you were like, yeah, I love the remodels, I love the supermarket, or was it something where you're like, look, I want to do some more stuff?
So Albertsons checked out of Florida.
Yeah.
And that was kind of how we still, to this day, we still do work with like Safeway. Mm-hmm. But that was the big kind of transition moment. It was like, and I was happy about it because it was time to do something different. But I stepped right into this like multi-use, multi-floor,
right,
four building project over in Tampa that had all of this hair on its like power lines and easements and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, okay.
You're young, ambitious. I'll take it.
Yeah. We just put different, same pieces. Yeah. We just put them together differently.
Yeah. So I want to go to your like leadership, right? So, starting at 19 at Cuhaci and then getting to, where you're in a leadership position now, what was the leadership like early on? And then how did that kind of shape where the leader that you did become here at Cuhaci now?
So I love studying leadership. Like I love to read. I'm back in college now to get my business degree in part because that's the part of it that I like. But I was fortunate enough to be around some people, and I was able to see good leadership from bad leadership, and take the good and leave the bad behind. It was always being open to be taught, but also being open to teach. Even if you didn't fully embrace it, like that was a way that I learned the most if I had to actually execute what I learned.
What were some of the top like leadership traits that you saw that, hey, these work? And then what were some of the top that you were like, okay, let's not do that?
So this is my favorite Lonnie Peterson story. Actually, one of the highlights, like one of the best things that I've ever done in my career was I actually got to facilitate his funeral.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, I known his wife for a long time, but I told this story at his funeral. I was like 22, 23 years old, and I get the opportunity to go market a project with Lonnie. So we're driving to the West Coast. First of all, I drove.
Was it in the Mustang?
No. But the crazy thing is like this isn't the part of the story that's great. But my car broke down. Like want to talk about like like great moment in life.
Like, first of all, Lonnie, why didn't you drive?
Yeah, but he was totally cool. I remember him not being. I think because it was after we actually met with the client. If it had been before the client, it might have been. We might have saw a different Lonnie.
Right.
Because he was competitive too. But we're driving, and maybe when we were sitting in the garage, I don't remember. But he looks at me and he goes, "Hey," he goes, "Do people say that I'm a prick?" And I'm like, because the answer is yes.
Yeah, right.
Like the answer is totally yes. And I realized that moment, okay, I had been with Lonnie. I started when I was 19. We had 35 people. We're probably hovering, I don't know, 60, 75 people. And when I started, we were a bunch of really, majority of us were single. So I looked at him, I said, Lonnie, I said, when I started here, there's 35 of us, we're single. You go out, you kill stuff, you bring it home for us to eat, and there's 35 mouths. Right. I said, but now most of us are married, we got kids. I was like, you go out to kill stuff, like you got to feed like 150, 200 people. And I said, there's probably a lot of pressure in that, so you earn the right to be a prick every once in a while. But what I learned from that was, you should want feedback. Like this wasn't when you had like 360 feedback models. Like it was just him wanting to know legitimately how people felt. Now, I don't know if he ever really thought about that later. It's like, okay, I'm being a little bit of a prick here. I'm going to stop. But I learned that I want to know how I'm interacting with people. I want them to respect me. I want them to know that I actually legitimately care about what they think. So that was a huge, really foundational lesson that I learned early. Then I learned how to be a bully. And I'm like, no, I was around some people that just would just pull people out of teams and different stuff like that. I'm like, okay. Like just because you have the authority doesn't mean that you need to exercise it. Like there are times where you just have to go, listen, I'm the boss. I got to play that card. But I don't like to play that card very often. I want people's buy-in. So seeing it without that, I was like, I'm not gonna pull that one forward.
Right. Do you think like that helps the relationship where, you're not being a bully, but they also understand that you are in a position of, we can call it power or responsibility, where you do have to kind of tell them what to do. But in order for them to buy in, you still have to like water that relationship and allow that to kind of go.
Oh, I am all in on relationships. Like at the end of the day, like, they always say people quit because of bad bosses, right? I mean, there's some fundamental lessons out here, but if you want people to perform, like you have to legitimately want them to win. Right. And not everybody leads that way. Not everybody says, oh, I want the people who work for me to win because then they might take my job. Like that's immense insecurity. Yeah. And I'm not shy. I don't have insecurity issues. I feel somewhat bad for the people that do, but I legitimately want people to win. And I look at it, I'm not expected really to make any money. Like my job is not really calculated by how productive I am. So I'm like, okay, the majority of my time has to be making sure that the people around me are successful. They have the stuff that they need. They have the tools, the knowledge, the ability. And yes, I get to sell, so it's actually having work to work on. But if I make up my mind that I'm going to make sure they have what they need to win, I ultimately win too.
Right. And becoming in a leadership position, I think the critical the constructive criticism is good, right? Because I think it's the catalyst of growth, right? So we have to have that feedback no matter what we're doing, but specifically in a leadership role, because we do have to kind of be tailored towards what the people are receiving, what they're not receiving, and how we can become a better leader. What are some things that you were like, that's not what I want to do as a leader, that you learned early on?
So you gotta be grown up. And sometimes that's hard. Like, I like to have fun. But so I had this lady, and she was much senior to me. And man, we were like oil and water. Like, it was not good. And she theoretically, she quote unquote worked for me,
right,
which I'm sure was not comfortable for her. 'Cause like, I'm in my early 20s. Right. She's clearly like double that. I'm not allowed to talk about exactly how old she is because it's an HR deal. I learned that, by the way.
HR rules process.
I learned a lot of HR rules. There's and so we were just having conflict, and it got real, like, personal. Mm-hmm. And I did some things, and I look back and I'm like, that was just immature.
Right.
And granted, I was 21, like, there's stuff in our brains that just weren't literally connected. But I just learned, I was like, it's okay to have fun, but you have a limit. Like, you have to be the adult in the room if you're really going to be a leader. Right. It doesn't mean you can't have fun. It just means you have to control it.
Right, you've got to set those boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's important. I think as we, we manage those relationships with those people, but you don't want to be the big boss is just dictating everybody around. I know, for me in my life, I've had the opportunity to have mentors and leaders that I've looked up to that truly do want me to succeed. And there's a substantial amount of value there. Yeah. And I think oftentimes, leaders can kind of get in this position of power where they're like, okay, you got to do what I say, or, and not as I do kind of thing. Because oftentimes they're not following their own rules. But I think it definitely helps in that buy-in, building that relationship, allowing your company to create a culture around you of how you treat those people. So I think it's invaluable how it's been structured like that. So I appreciate you sharing that origin story.
No, it's great because I have done it, virtually all of it. Like, I started at the bottom. It does add to an interesting perspective because I understand pretty much everybody's roles, right, except for the people with letters, like the C-suite stuff. I'll get there someday. But I think when you have that perspective, you're like, okay, it's not that any one job is less important, because they all have a role. They all have a position to play if you're going to be successful. So you have to support those people.
Right. I mean, it's a well-oiled machine. And if you have one bolt missing or one screw, it'll tear the whole thing down.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate that. We're going to jump into part 2. So Beyond the Blueprint podcast, stay tuned with Nathan, and we're going to get into part 2, some of the success strategies, some of the pitfalls, and some of the stories that he has to tell along with part 1. So stay tuned. We'll see you next time.